Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Dean. I'm a dietitian here in Connecticut on the shoreline. Thank you so much for inviting me into your home today and answering your questions that you have about nutrition and liver health. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that this information is just for your personal use. It is not medical advice, and I strongly encourage you to talk to your physician if you have any specific questions that you would like answered. Okay. So today I'd like to talk to you about food availability and what foods you can choose, especially during this time when some of your normal foods may not be available. I'd like to talk to you about some staple pantry items that you can have available and how you can use those to make a multiple different meals and how to be creative with those items. And I'd like to give you a little template on how to create some meals. So how can you make sure that you're getting all the nutrients you need using those staple pantry items? Last, I'd like to talk to you about emotional eating. I've heard a lot of people experiencing some emotional eating, whether it's eating more than usual or less. So I think that would be a helpful topic to kind of address and give you some tips and tools on how you can navigate through emotional eating. The very last thing that I'll do with you today is answer some of the questions that were sent in to me previous to this talk. So hopefully I'll address a little bit of everything that you're looking for, but if I do miss something, please feel free to drop a comment below and I will answer the question and get back to you as soon as possible. All right, so let's get started. First, I'd like to talk to you about the uncertainty that we have right now in the food availability or the lack of food availability. I know in my local grocery store, we don't have frozen vegetables right now. So it required me to think outside the box and try some new things. So don't be afraid to try something you haven't tried before. This may be an opportunity for you to try a new food or a new vegetable or a new fruit or a new grain, something that you haven't had before. This might be a time where you have to go outside your comfort zone and try something different. So you could try canned fruits and vegetables, making sure that you're draining those vegetables, canned vegetables, or you're looking for fruits that are in the juice and not the syrup. You could also explore other areas of the grocery store. So I know in our grocery store, you can find rice in a couple different areas. You also can find peanut butter in a couple different areas. So if you're always going to aisle 3 to find your peanut butter, maybe you need to try a different aisle or the organic section or other areas of the grocery store to see if those foods are available somewhere else. Again, exploring other areas of the grocery store, trying canned fruits and vegetables, and being adventurous. Those are some big tips that I would suggest, especially during this time, because we can't get the foods that we're used to. And most of us are creatures of habit. We like to eat the same thing every day. And this is just a time where you can't do that, and that you have to be a little bit more flexible in your food choices and be a little bit flexible and find some compassion and know that you're doing the best that you can with what you have available. So some staple pantry items that I think that most people should have available or all people should have available that would be helpful would include canned fruits, vegetables, and protein. And when I say this, when I say purchase those foods and have them available to you in adequate quantities, I recognize the privilege in saying that. I know not everybody has that privilege in going to the grocery store whenever they want and purchasing as much food as they can. So I do acknowledge that privilege that some people may have. So if you are relying on food pantry, food items, or donations, please know that finding compassion with yourself and that the foods that you may be given may not fit your typical food choices, and that's okay. It's what we do consistently over time that makes a difference. So although these next few weeks or so may be outside of your normal, it's okay that they're outside your normal, and you're just going to do the best that you can. If you do have a chance to go to the grocery store or buy some other food items, these would be the food items I would suggest. So let's start with fruits and vegetables. So if you're buying fresh fruits and vegetables, some of the ones that would stay fresh longer would be apples, bananas, grapes, carrots, squashes, some of those like hardier fruits and vegetables. things that typically go bad fast would be like berries, bananas. So you want, or bananas actually depends. They might last a couple days, but if you don't eat them, you can always, and if they turn brown, you can always make banana bread out of them. So bananas are a good choice to have around. Protein foods. So we want to make sure we're getting enough protein into our body. So you could do canned tuna fish, canned salmon, beans. You could also do frozen shrimp, frozen meats. Those are also good options. Again, being flexible, they may not be your typical food choices, but they will fit your needs for now. And that's a helpful way to look at it, is we're doing the best we can with what we have at this moment. So when we do purchase canned meats, such as tuna, chicken, or canned salmon, finding alternative ways to use those, whether it's like a tuna noodle casserole, or you're making salmon patties or salmon cakes, that's okay too. When you are using beans, make sure you're draining them to get rid of some of that extra sodium and rinsing them. And the same with canned vegetables. You want to make sure that you're draining those as well and rinsing them, because that will reduce the sodium content by about 40%. That's significant. When we're purchasing canned fruits, we really want to make sure that we're looking for the fruits that are in the juice, 100% juice, and avoiding the canned fruits that are in syrup, even the ones that are in light syrup. We want to try to avoid those. But again, that caveat is still there. We're doing the best that we can. Ideally, you would get the ones that are in juice and skipping the ones in syrup. When you're picking frozen meats, look at the ingredients. Just make sure they're not adding a significant amount of sodium. So the frozen meats like shrimp or chicken or ground beef, we just want to make sure that it's just the meat. So we want to make sure it's just the protein. A lot of times they will pump in some extra sodium to add weight or as a preservative. So we want to try to limit the added sodium in those foods. Okay, so healthy fats. So when we talk about adding fats to our diet, we want to make sure that we're adding the ones that support heart health. And those would be your mono and poly unsaturated fats. We want to try to reduce the saturated fats in our diet. And the easiest way to know the difference between a heart healthy fat and a saturated fat is its consistency. So your heart healthy fats, or your mono and poly unsaturated fats, those are going to be liquid at room temperature. So that would be like your olive oil, canola oil, those are going to be your heart healthy fats. Your saturated fats are going to be solid at room temperature. So just think saturated starts with an S and solid starts with an S. So those would be like coconut oil, Crisco, butter, lard, any of those things are going to be saturated fats. Then we got to take it one step further. When we think about baked goods, most of those baked goods are going to be made with one of those saturated fats. So we also have to watch our quantity when we're eating some of those baked goods. Because I know when I make cookies, I make it with butter. There's nothing wrong with having a treat every so often, but we just have to reduce the amount of saturated fat that's in our diet overall. So we want to focus on those heart healthy fats, which would include your nuts and your seeds, your nut butter, so peanut butter, almond butter, even sun butter. So if you have a peanut allergy, you could do like a sun butter as long as that meets your dietary needs. That would be a good option too. Guacamole, avocados, those are also some heart healthy fats. So anything that comes from a plant, like avocado, a plant-based fat, is going to be a heart healthy fat. Anything that comes from an animal fat, is a saturated fat. So saturated fats are only found or mostly found in animal products. So your beef, your chicken, and those type of things. I know coconut oil kind of falls a little bit on both, but it's a kind of a special kind of fat, but it is a saturated fat. Again, focusing on those heart healthy fats and limiting those saturated fats, that would be ideal. So we talked a little bit about fruits and vegetables, focusing on the canned goods, even frozen would be okay. We talked about protein, so using your canned protein foods. And we talked a little bit about adding in those heart healthy fats. Let's talk about carbohydrates a little bit. So Carbohydrates are a lot of different things. Most times people associate carbohydrates with just like pasta and bread and rice. But carbohydrates also include your dairy products and your fruits and your vegetables, as well as grains like brown rice or buckwheat. Those are also carbohydrates. When we think about putting together a nice, healthy, nutrient-dense meal, we want to try to get a protein, a carbohydrate, and a healthy fat. So when we add carbs, we want to look for carbohydrates that are whole grain, fruits, vegetables, or low-fat dairy products. So for example, a whole grain would be like whole wheat bread or oatmeal. Right now, there is bread available. I know in our grocery store we can buy bread. It may not be the bread that you're used to, but there are breads available. I have also made bread this week, which is incredibly easy. All you need is a bag of flour and some yeast. So if you haven't tried to make bread before, this time might be a good opportunity for you to try something new. And then when we make things ourselves, we have more control over what's in it. So obviously bread that sits on a shelf is going to have more preservatives, but bread that you make in your kitchen is going to have very little. And I know that my family, when I make bread, they love it. It doesn't really last long because it's a small little loaf, but I know that they're getting a good source of nutrients with very little preservatives in it. So you could also opt to buy some flour and some yeast to make your own bread. Dried lentils or beans, those are another source of carbohydrates, as well as brown rice, quinoa, buckwheat, whole grain pastas, bean pastas. So I typically like this bean pasta. So it's black bean, but you also can do like edamame pasta. That way you're getting some carbohydrates and protein at the same time. And I also like having oatmeal as a product in my house too. So I can do that oatmeal bread or oatmeal for breakfast. That's also a good option to have available for your carbohydrate. Let's see. So another thing about carbohydrates is thinking of things that you can freeze. So right now we do have food available. However, if you're living in a rural area and you only can get to the grocery store once a week or once every 2 weeks, you kind of want to think ahead and what things can freeze well. So typically your breads will freeze well, whole grain English muffins will freeze well. So you could even prepare maybe a casserole ahead of time and freeze that. I have made and prepared like lasagnas or soups or stews and froze those, and those have thawed and baked well. So you may want to think outside the box a little bit too, like, okay, I may not need this right now, but I probably could use this in the future. Let me buy it, throw it in the freezer, and then I'm all set. And then that will also limit how many times you have to go to the grocery store, because I know most of us are trying not to go to the grocery store very often right now. So kind of thinking ahead and what you can use today, but also maybe in a couple weeks from now. Also consider leftovers. So if you say you make brown rice for dinner tonight and you have some leftover, kind of think ahead on how you can reuse that brown rice. Maybe you can throw it in your soup or your stew to make it a little bit more hearty. So when you're planning your meals and you're thinking ahead, okay, I'm having brown rice with my roasted chicken tonight. Maybe I'll use the bones from the chicken to make soup, and then I can use the rice to throw in the soup when it's ready. So you kind of want to plan ahead and think ahead how you can reuse those leftovers. Just be mindful that those leftovers should be thrown away maybe like 3 or 4 days after, and that's if they've been held at proper temperature. When in doubt, throw it out. I never risk leftovers, but you may want to think about how you can use those leftovers in the future so the foods can last longer. All right, so creating simple meals, I think it's helpful to have a little template available. So again, a protein, a carbohydrate, and a healthy fat. And your proteins would be animal products, so your chicken, your beef, tuna fish, canned chicken, shrimp, any of those type of things would be your protein foods. Vegetarian sources of protein would include like your beans, lentils, tofu, edamame, soy products. So those would be your proteins. And then you would want to add a grain. And so just remember, or I'm sorry, a carbohydrate. And just remember that a carbohydrate includes your grains, your fruits and vegetables, your dairy products, and your whole, and I think I said whole grains and whole grains. So you want to pick a protein, you want to pick a carbohydrate, I would say a grain plus a fruit or a vegetable. And then you also want to add in a healthy fat. So we talked about healthy fats being, remember olive oil is a heart healthy fat. So you could drizzle olive oil, maybe when you're sauteing your chicken, avocado to a salad, nuts and seeds on the side. It doesn't, remember that a meal doesn't have to be like all together. You can have little sides. So you can have like a handful of nuts on the side. I know it may sound weird, but it is a way for you to get the healthy fat in. You could have some olives on the side. So you could do like chicken, brown rice, a little bit of olives, and maybe mandarin oranges on the side. So keep your meals simple. They don't have to be gourmet, especially during this time when we're doing the best that we can. Keeping your meals super simple. I call it the KISS method. Keep it super simple. Protein, carbohydrate, healthy fat. And when you kind of keep that into your mind, especially when you're planning out your meals, where's my carb, where's my protein, where's my healthy fat, then you know you're going to be able to combine a really satisfying and nutritious meal. And that's the other piece. When we get a protein, a carb, and a healthy fat, we are creating meals that are satisfying, which means we won't be going back to the kitchen every 5 minutes to kind of fill that void or that hunger. That typically happens when we're not eating balanced meals. If we're just eating maybe an apple, you're going to find yourself back in the kitchen 15 minutes later. But if you had an apple with a little bit of peanut butter and maybe a turkey roll-up, that might be more satisfying and hold you over longer. So especially during this time when we're trying to minimize going to the grocery store, then we want to try to get the biggest bang for our buck when we do eat. And by combining those protein, carbs, and fat, then you are going to get the best bang for your buck. You're going to create satisfying meals that will leave you feeling satisfied longer, less snacking during the day, which means less grocery shopping overall, which is good. So some simple meal ideas that I came up with that would be easy to prepare and really affordable would be like quesadillas. So you could buy like the round corn tortillas. You could do a can of black beans, make sure you rinse and drain them, a little guacamole or sliced avocado, and a little low-fat cheese. You could heat that up in a pan or in the microwave, and that's a really good, satisfying meal. I like that. The other thing you can do, and I actually had this for breakfast this morning, is a corn tortilla. Warm it up a little bit of peanut butter, banana, roll it up, maybe a little cinnamon or a drizzle of honey, and that's a really good, satisfying meal. And takes 2 seconds to make, and the overall cost of that is probably pennies. Some other things that you could make would be like chili. So you could use the canned tomatoes. You could do like low salt or no salt and add salt on your own, or spices are always great. So make sure you're using like your paprika or your chili powder. You could do, so the canned tomatoes, canned beans, just make sure they're rinsed and drained. So even when you're putting beans in a soup or stew, just make sure you're rinsing and draining them so you can reduce the sodium content. And that would be your protein source. You could do canned corn, same thing, rinse and drain. And then you could add anything from the freezer department. You could do like frozen spinach or frozen onions or peppers. You can make it more of a vegetarian chili. So just get a little bit creative. And again, all those products that I mentioned for the chili are all canned, and they all can be in your pantry for a long period of time. So stocking up on those items will be helpful to carry you maybe through times when you can't get to the grocery store or food may not be available to you. And they're all very affordable. Oatmeal I've mentioned before. So oatmeal you can make. I always suggest making it with milk because it does add a little bit more protein to it, or soy milk or whatever. Just remember some of those nut-based milks like almond milk, coconut milk, those do not have a good source of protein, whereas cow's milk and soy milk does. So you want to opt for something like that. And then you could always throw some like frozen berries on top or sliced banana. Tuna noodle casserole, I mentioned that before. So pasta stays fresh forever, dried pasta. And then your canned tuna, you could buy a can of cream of chicken. Like I have here, you could buy this and a can of tuna. So those two products, and with dried pasta, that would make a really good casserole and meal. And again, something that you could freeze for later. Another idea that my kids like is actually pizza. So you could buy maybe whole grain English muffins, canned tomato sauce, and a little bit of cheese. You could do like chopped peppers, frozen peppers, or whatever thawed before you put them on the pizza. And you could make pizzas like that. Again, you could freeze the English muffins. You could buy the frozen vegetables, the canned tomato sauce. Those are all really easy things that you can keep in your pantry or your freezer that will last for a while. And another idea is like a baked potato bar. So you could use sweet potatoes or white potatoes and fill them with low-fat sour cream. I like to use plain Greek yogurt. Gives it a little bit more protein. Tastes like sour cream too, surprisingly. You could do frozen diced broccoli, a little bit of low-fat cheese, and just kind of stuff that potato with a lot of good nutrients. And that's a really yummy and comforting warm meal to have. So that's another good option as well. Last, I want to just touch upon the emotional eating part. So especially during this time when there's so much uncertainty around us, sometimes we're trying to navigate these emotions, and a lot of us will either go towards food or we lose our appetite. So understanding that nourishing your body is really a form of self-care is so important. So even if you're not feeling hungry, kind of having a structured eating pattern is helpful. You eat some breakfast, you eat some lunch, you eat some dinner. What you put in those meals is really going to depend on how you feel. So if you wake up in the morning with no appetite, having a big old breakfast is not going to feel good to you. But maybe having a smoothie would, or having a half of an English muffin with a little bit of peanut butter would feel good. Same with lunch. If you're not feeling up to a big lunch, maybe a little bowl of soup, chicken soup would be good for you. So getting the nutrients in throughout the day is incredibly important for self-care and for energy. When you don't eat, you don't feel well. And we really want you to feel well. We want to keep your immune system up. And if you're not eating, you're not sleeping, then that's going to be tough on your immune system. So eating is incredibly important. The flip side is when we go to food for comfort, we really want to think about what are we looking to achieve. If you're feeling anxious or afraid or scared, those are the emotions that need to be addressed rather than going towards food. So next time you find yourself standing in front of the fridge with the door open or in front of the pantry and you know you're not hungry, I really want you to think about what emotion am I feeling right now and what do I really need? So if you're feeling fearful, do you need to talk to somebody about that? Do you just need to sit and feel and think about, okay, what is in my control and what can I do next? Because the food is really just a Band-Aid. It's not going to make the emotion go away. It's still going to be there when the food is over. So the only thing that helps the emotion is actually dealing with the emotion. So it is okay that that happens, but you really want to be aware and mindful of when it's happening and give yourself the opportunity to make a different decision. So when you feel like you're eating outside of hunger, kind of stop yourself and say, okay, what emotion am I feeling right now and what do I actually need? And so different things that you may notice is, okay, maybe I need a little more self-care, which includes sleep, or maybe I need to talk to somebody about how I'm feeling so uncertain right now, or I'm scared, or I'm fearful. Maybe I just need a little bit of a break. Maybe I just need to listen to music or go for a walk or exercise. So really figure out what form of self-care will help you, because that's what's going to help the emotion rather than the food. Another thing that you can do is kind of sit with your feelings. So if I'm feeling really like everything's out of my control, sometimes just sitting in a chair, feeling my feet firmly planted on the ground and closing my eyes and just taking a few deep breaths and just kind of allow myself to be present with whatever feeling I'm feeling is helpful. And a last thing you could do is just helpful distraction with, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. Maybe I just need to step out of this for a second, not think about all that's going on outside in the world right now, and just kind of put my headphones on, listen to music, and kind of detach for a second, with the promise of coming back and dealing with that emotion when you're done. Sometimes that's helpful. And a lot of times people use exercise for that. Like, this is too much right now. I just need to get out, exercise, clear my head, and come back to it. So again, these are just different ways that you can identify and deal with the emotion without reaching for food, because food is just the Band-Aid. We got to get to the root cause of what's happening. And of course, sleep is always really helpful too. If your sleep's off, then everything kind of tends to be off. So I challenge you, next time you find that you're in front of the pantry or the fridge, maybe set a 5-minute timer, and kind of go through those little suggestions that I have, feeling your emotions, maybe taking a little time out, and figuring out what you need instead of the food. So set the timer just to kind of tune into what your body's asking of you. And then figure out how you can address that. So if you find that you just need to talk to a friend, who is there that you can call? So you want to think about that. Or if you need just to break away, can you just throw your headphones on and go for a walk? So I challenge you to use that 5-minute timer to dig a little bit deeper into what you actually need. So some of the questions that I had that I'll go over quickly would be, these are questions from you guys. The first one was, what do I do if I live in a rural area? And my suggestion would be, like, stock up when you can, get to the grocery store on some of those canned products, and some of those products that you can throw into the freezer. So first of all, plan ahead. You need to make a menu. If you're just kind of winging it at the grocery store, then it's not going to go so well. And you may get home and have nothing to prepare a meal with. So meal plan. And remember, you want a protein, carbohydrate, and a healthy fat. So if you just make a little chart, what's my protein, what's my carbs, what's my healthy fat, then that helps structure the meal planning. And you don't have to do that for every meal, but maybe most meals, just kind of keep it a loose structure. So plan ahead, write your grocery list, and rely on those products that you can freeze, and those canned products. So canned tuna, canned salmon, canned chicken, frozen vegetables, grains that can be frozen, canned tomatoes, canned beans, even dried beans. Those would be some options that you can use. And again, think outside the box. If this is not something that you've used before, maybe it's time to try something new. And the goal right now is not to eat perfect, right? The goal right now is to give yourself some nutrients to help you sustain your energy and your immune system. If we're stressing about eating perfect, then we're kind of defeating the purpose. We need to do the best we can with what's available at this time. There are plenty of nutritious foods available. They may be different than what you're used to. You may have to push outside your comfort zone and try some of those options. The next question I had was post-transplant weight gain. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over how our body responds to trauma. So your body may be trying to find its new normal. And the best thing for you right now is to continue to exercise and eat nutritiously and be accepting of what your body is going through. I know that's easier said than done, but we don't really have control over what our body does. And when we try to control things that are out of our control, we tend to create stress that we don't need. And again, I understand that's so much easier said than done. So just take it day by day. And when you start to feel like you're having a lot of negative self-talk, just remind yourself that you want to talk to yourself the same way that you would talk to a good friend. And if you wouldn't say, to say what you're saying to a good friend, then you probably shouldn't be saying that to yourself. So really find that compassion for what your body has gone through and what it's doing for you. Your body's main job is to keep you alive. And if that means it's going to gain a little bit of weight right now to feel safe, then that might be what's happening. It's hard to say what will happen in the future. The weight may naturally come back off once your body reaches a new homeostasis. But right now it's doing the best that it can with what it has. And the best thing and most compassionate thing that you can do is just accept the body for where it's at. All right. prednisone. So a lot of times I have patients that are on prednisone, and that steroid does stimulate appetite. So you may feel more hungry right now, and that's totally normal. So you kind of have to ebb and flow with that. So if you are feeling a little bit more hungry, make sure you're choosing like those nutrient dense foods. Maybe it's okay, more fruits and vegetables, less starchy carbohydrates, still making sure that you're getting plenty of nutrients in each day. You can't respond, again, how your body, you can't control how your body responds to medications or anything like that. So you do have to meet yourself with where you are, and offer yourself some compassion. And if you are taking prednisone, you probably need it. So you, and your body's relying on it. So that's out of your control. What is in your control is how you love and treat your body with care, and the nutrients that you're putting in. So continue to exercise, continue to eat right, and be thankful for what your body is doing for you. We get this one body, so we have to really appreciate it and take care of it the best we can, and accept what's out of our control. Nutrition and exercise, those things are in our control most part, but how your body responds is not always in our control. So find acceptance with what your body's doing, and try not to fight against it as hard as that is. Try to find some love and some compassion for what it's doing for you right now. When you want to find somebody to help you with your diet, I would recommend that you seek out a registered dietitian, and you can find registered dietitians on eatright.org. There's probably a search, or through your insurance companies. So I take insurance in my private practice here in Connecticut. And so I'm listed on all the major insurance companies' websites. So I would highly recommend finding a registered dietitian, because they are your nutrition experts. Not every person that calls himself a nutritionist is a registered dietitian. It gets very confusing, but you want a registered dietitian. You wouldn't take your car to a cardiologist, and you wouldn't take your heart to a mechanic. So you want to make sure that you're getting someone who is educated in the field. You take your heart to a cardiologist, and you take your car to a mechanic, right? So you want to take your nutrition needs to a dietitian. And so doing a search on your insurance company website, that would probably be a good first place to start. And then again, make sure that you're getting a registered dietitian, not just a nutritionist, because they do not have the same amount of education that a dietitian does. So that would be my first suggestion. You can always reach out to me if you would like, again, after this, and if you have questions, I'm happy to help direct you to a dietitian in your area. I do work virtually, so you can always work with me too, but it may be nice to find someone who's local to you. Snacks to have available when you are out and about: peanut butter crackers. That's like my favorite thing. My clients, I think, will laugh when they see this, because I'm always like, peanut butter crackers in your glove compartment. Those are the best things to have. If you travel a lot, having oatmeal packets, that would be a good thing to have too, because you can always make those in your hotel room. When I traveled, I would bring like a little cooler with hard-boiled eggs and peanut butter crackers, some trail mix, things like that. So again, just tuning in with your hunger. You don't want to eat outside of hunger. You don't want to just snack because you're driving. You want to eat because you're hungry. Peanut butter sandwiches. You also want to plan ahead. So CVS, or any of the other convenience stores or gas stations have actually a lot of food available to you: cheese sticks, peanut butter crackers, yogurts. You could do like low-fat milk. You can do, I'm not a big fan of protein bars, but you could do a protein bar as long as it has a good amount of protein in it. A lot of them now have fruit cups. You could do fruit cups. Those are some of the things that I can think of. Even Starbucks has some options, whether it's salads. And my favorite treat when I go to a Starbucks would be like a latte, a low-fat latte, like 1% milk. That's your carbs, that's your protein, and your healthy fat. So sometimes that's a little fun treat to have. The goal right now is the goal when you're traveling is to get a protein, a carb, and a fat. So the latte is actually all those, peanut butter crackers as well. So you want to try to find something that has a combination of those macronutrients. When you don't have a combination, they tend to be less satisfying. And again, when we feel satisfied, generally we eat less overall. So thank you guys so much for listening. I know I hope I answered some of your questions and gave you some good tips and tools to use along the way. And if you have any more questions, please send them my way. I'm happy to answer them. But overall, in this time with so much uncertainty, the goal is to do the best we can with what we have. And sometimes thinking outside the box is the best thing that we can do. Make sure you're speaking to yourself in a loving way and finding compassion during this time. Stressing and trying to be perfect is not going to help. So focusing on what's in your control and kind of accepting what's out of our control and handling those things the best that we can. That's really all we can do at this time. Thank you so much for inviting me into your house. And I wish everybody to well and to stay healthy, and keep me posted if you have any questions. Take care. Bye.